Grayson Memorial Hospital was a fortress of sterile white walls and fluorescent lights. Its labyrinthine corridors echoing with the soft squeak of nurses' shoes and the distant hum of life-saving machines. To the public, it was a beacon of modern medicine, a place where miracles happened daily. But beneath its polished exterior, something darker festered. Dr. Ethan Caldwell had been one of Grayson's most celebrated physicians for nearly 2 decades. With his sharp jawline, piercing blue eyes, and an air of quiet confidence, he inspired trust in even the most skeptical patients. He specialized in palliative care, working closely with terminally ill patients who were often clinging to their last threads of hope. His reputation as a compassionate doctor made him beloved by both staff and families alike. Yet behind closed doors, whispers began to circulate among the hospital's night shift workers, whispers that would soon unravel into something far more sinister. It started subtly. Nurses noticed strange irregularities in patient charts. A sudden spike in deaths among those on Dr. Caldwell's caseload raised eyebrows, but not enough alarm to warrant investigation. After all, these were critically ill individuals. Death was always lurking just around the corner. What no one could explain, however, were the faint sounds coming from room 312 after hours, the room reserved exclusively for Caldwell's special cases. It wasn't screams or cries they heard, it was softer, almost indistinguishable murmurs, like someone whispering secrets too terrible to be spoken aloud. One evening, Sarah Myers, a young nurse new to the hospital, found herself walking past room 312 during her shift. She'd only been at Grayson for 3 weeks, still navigating the sprawling building and learning the rhythms of its peculiar ecosystem. As she passed the door, a chill ran down her spine. The hallway seemed colder here, the air heavier. And then she heard it, a low, rhythmic chanting, barely audible over the hum of machinery inside the room. Curiosity tugged at her, but fear rooted her feet to the floor. She turned to leave when the sound stopped abruptly. The silence that followed felt deafening. Then came footsteps, slow, deliberate, and approaching the door. Sarah bolted, her heart pounding wildly as she fled down the corridor. When she finally stopped to catch her breath near the nurse's station, she convinced herself she'd imagined it. Sarah's unease lingered throughout the following days, manifesting in restless nights and an inability to focus during her shifts. She tried to push the incident out of her mind, chalking it up to nerves from being new to the job. But fate, or perhaps something darker, had other plans. On a particularly slow night, Sarah was assigned to assist Dr. Caldwell in administering medication to several of his patients. One name stood out on her clipboard: Margaret Ellis, a frail woman in her late 60s battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Margaret had been admitted weeks earlier, her condition deteriorating rapidly. Despite aggressive treatments, her prognosis remained grim. According to hospital protocol, she should have been moved to hospice care, yet Dr. Caldwell insisted on keeping her under his direct supervision. As Sarah entered Margaret's room, she noticed how eerily calm the atmosphere felt. The usual beeping of monitors was muted, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Dr. Caldwell stood beside the bed, his back to her as he adjusted an IV drip attached to Margaret's arm. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, and there was an intensity in his demeanor that unnerved her. "Good evening, Nurse Myers," he said without turning around. His voice carried a warmth that didn't quite reach his eyes when he finally glanced at her. We're administering a new cocktail tonight, something experimental. Sarah hesitated. Experimental? I don't recall seeing any documentation approving this treatment. Caldwell smiled thinly, a gesture that sent another shiver down her spine. You won't find it in the records. This is off the books. For now, let's just say it's part of my ongoing research into improving end-of-life comfort. Before she could respond, Margaret stirred weakly, her cloudy eyes fluttering open. Her lips moved as if trying to speak, but no words came out. Instead, her gaze locked onto Sarah's face, filled with a mixture of terror and desperation. It was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared, but it left an indelible mark on the young nurse. Later that night, unable to sleep, Sarah decided to dig deeper into Caldwell's activities. Using her access credentials, she pulled up the files of recent deceased patients under his care. What she discovered chilled her to the bone. Every single one of them had died within hours of receiving what Caldwell referred to as comfort measures. Their cause of death listed as natural causes, despite glaring inconsistencies in their medical histories. None of the families had questioned the outcomes. Grief often clouded judgment. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah approached Dr. Marcus Liu, a senior physician known for his integrity and skepticism. Reluctantly, she shared her findings, careful to frame them as concerns rather than accusations. Liu listened intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. I've heard rumors, he admitted quietly, but nothing concrete. If you're right, though, this goes beyond negligence. We need proof before we can act. Their conversation was cut short when Caldwell suddenly appeared in the doorway, his presence commanding yet unsettling. Though he offered no indication he'd overheard their discussion, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he knew exactly what they'd been talking about. Over the next few days, Sarah became hyper-aware of Caldwell's movements. She documented every interaction, every anomaly, and every whispered rumor she encountered. Her paranoia grew alongside her determination to expose the truth. But the closer she got, the more dangerous things became. One fateful night, while checking inventory in the supply closet adjacent to room 312, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden compartment tucked behind shelves of medical supplies. Inside, she found a leather-bound journal belonging to Caldwell. Its pages were filled with cryptic notes detailing what he called the Mercy Protocol, a twisted philosophy justifying euthanasia not merely as an act of compassion, but as a means of controlling mortality itself. He believed he was sparing suffering souls from lingering agony, granting them peace through his own methods, even if they weren't ready to die. But it wasn't just the writings that horrified her. Tucked between the pages were photographs of patients, each marked with dates corresponding to their deaths. Some images showed them lying peacefully in their beds, while others depicted scenes so grotesque they defied comprehension. In one photo, a man lay contorted in agony, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. Beneath it, Caldwell had scrawled a colon. Failure must refine dosage. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the journal, realizing the scale of his depravity. This wasn't about mercy, it was obsession. And Sarah knew she couldn't keep the secret any longer. Armed with the evidence, Sarah confided in Dr. Liu once again. Together, they devised a plan to confront Caldwell and bring his crimes to light. They scheduled a meeting under the pretense of discussing upcoming procedural changes, ensuring witnesses would be present. But Caldwell, ever cunning, anticipated their move. During the meeting, he calmly admitted to everything, not out of remorse but pride. He spoke passionately about the Mercy Protocol, framing himself as a misunderstood visionary rather than a monster. His charisma was undeniable, and some in attendance began to waver, questioning whether his actions were truly malevolent or merely misguided. In a desperate bid to sway opinion, Sarah played an audio recording she'd secretly captured of Caldwell discussing his experiments. Voices erupted in outrage, and security was called. But as officers arrived to arrest him, Caldwell vanished, slipping away like smoke through the cracks of the very institution he'd corrupted. Months later, Grayson Memorial underwent sweeping reforms, and Caldwell's victims received justice posthumously. Yet Sarah couldn't escape the lingering sense that his influence hadn't fully disappeared. Late at night, she sometimes swore she heard whispers echoing through the halls, faint remnants of the man who once walked among them, cloaked in a veneer of benevolence. And then, one evening, while reviewing old files, she noticed something chilling, a new patient roster bearing familiar names. At the bottom of the list, written in elegant script, was a single phrase: "The work continues.